The devastating loss of a child on a desolate pioneer farm in eastern Washington in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Life on a pioneer farm during the late 1800s was defined by toil, endurance, and an unyielding confrontation with the fragility of existence. In eastern Washington, the vast and untamed wilderness presented both promise and peril for settlers, who often faced unimaginable hardships. Among these, the loss of a child was perhaps the most devastating, an event that left undeniable scars on the hearts and lives of those who endured it. Eastern Washington during the late 1800s was characterized by its rugged beauty and harsh climate. Vast plains stretched under an endless sky, broken only by rolling hills and sparse groves of trees. While this land offered opportunities for farming, it also presented numerous challenges. Winters were bitterly cold and summers were scorching. Settlers often faced droughts, storms, and the ever present threat of crop failure. For a pioneer family, survival demanded on relentless labor, and the isolation of their homesteads compounded their vulnerability. In this setting, children played a dual role. They were both sources of joy and vital contributors to the family's survival. Their presence was a testament to the future, and their small hands helped with chores, such as gathering firewood, feeding livestock, and tending to the garden. Yet the very conditions that made their help necessary also exposed them to many dangers, like disease, accidents, and the unforgiving elements. The death of a child often began with an illness that might seem mild at first, a fever, a persistent cough, or an unusual fatigue. In the absence of modern medicine, even minor ailments could quickly escalate. Diseases like typhoid, scarlet fever, and pneumonia swept through pioneer communities, striking the youngest and most vulnerable members. With no doctor nearby, families relied on home remedies, folk wisdom, and prayer, often watching helplessly as their child's condition deteriorated. Imagine a mother cradling her feverish child in a one-room cabin as the wind howled outside, her eyes darting between the flickering firelight and the child's flushed face. The father, stoic and desperate, might have ventured out in the freezing night to fetch water or to gather medicinal herbs. Every hour felt like a battle against an invisible enemy, and yet, despite their best efforts, the child's labored breaths grew shallower until they ceased altogether. The moment of a child's death on a desolate farm was marked by a haunting stillness. In the close confines of the cabin, where every sound carried weight, the absence of the child's voice was deafening. The parents, overcome with grief, might have held the small body for hours, unwilling to let it go. In such isolation, there was no one to share the burden of their sorrow. Neighbors, if they existed, were often miles away, and the logistical demands of burial fell entirely on the family. The father, likely exhausted from days of sleepless worry, would take up a spade and dig a grave in the frozen ground, his tears freezing on his cheeks as he worked. The mother, too stricken to speak, might prepare the child's body, wrapping it in the family's best blanket, a small gesture of dignity in the face of overwhelming loss. The funeral, if one could call it that, was a somber and solitary event without clergy or community to offer solace. The parents stood alone at the grave, clutching hands and whispering prayers. They might have recited verses from the Bible, their voices breaking with emotion, or they would simply stand in silence, unable to find words. The grave marker, often a simple wooded cross or a pile of stones, bore witness to their grief and their child's too short life. The grave's location was significant, often chosen on a hill overlooking the farm or near a tree that offered a sense of permanence for the family. This spot became a sacred ground, a place to visit in quiet moments and remember the child that they had lost. Life on the pioneer farm left little time for mourning. The demands of survival required the family to return to their chores almost immediately, even as their hearts ached with loss. Yet the absence of the child was keenly felt in every corner of their daily existence. The empty chair at the dinner table, the silent space in the corner where the child once played, and the unfinished tasks they had left behind served as constant reminders of their absence. Mothers, in particular, bore a heavy burden of grief. They often carried guilt, wondering if they had missed some crucial sign or failed to do enough to save their child. Fathers, while equally heartbroken, might have buried their sorrows in work, using physical labor as a means to cope. But for both, the isolation of frontier life meant that their mourning was largely private, with no extended family or community to share their pain. Despite the depth of their sorrows, pioneer families found ways to endure. Faith was a cornerstone of their resilience. Many turned to religious beliefs for comfort, trusting that their child's soul had found peace in heaven. Others sought solace in nature, finding beauty and meaning in the changing seasons and the cycles of life and death. Some families created rituals to honor their lost children, such as planting a tree near the grave or carving their initials into a nearby rock. These small acts provided a sense of connection and permanence, allowing parents to preserve their child's memory in the landscape they had come to call home. In the broader context of pioneer life, such losses were tragically common, yet each one was uniquely devastating and a testament to the irreplaceable bond between a parent and a child. The resilience required to endure such pain was a defining feature of the pioneer spirit, but it came at great emotional cost. The loss of a child on a desolate pioneer farm in eastern Washington in the late 1800s and early 1900s was a heartbreaking experience, amplified by the isolation and hardships of frontier life. It tested the limits of human endurance and left scars that never fully healed. Yet in their grief, pioneer families found ways to carry on, drawing strength from faith, memory, and the land itself. Their stories, though marked by sorrow, are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss.